Okay.
I am so excited to be here today, Michelle, with you, Michelle Whitney of Whitney & Co. You've been doing real estate staging for over 7 years, and that includes consultations, staging, and project management, which I'm really excited to talk about. So let's just start with what is staging and why would somebody want to do it?
That's a great question. A lot of people think that staging is just like primping pillows and laying throws across couches. And I see that all the time, and it just drives me crazy.
Yeah.
So that's actually not what staging is.
Okay.
A big benefit of staging is, I guess, emphasizing the good parts of a home.
Yep.
So putting your eye to what's great in the home and also distracting from what's not great in the home.
Got it.
So it really, staging is all about appealing to people's emotions.
Yep.
My goal as a stager for every person I work with is how can I get the most amount of money for you for your home and sell it as quickly as possible. So I really think of staging less about primping pillows
Yep.
and more about a marketing tool
Yep.
for agents to have in their back pocket.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, whether they do a consultation and then follow up and do what's on the to-do list, or we do a stage, if they do any of that, then it's going to be in better shape than it was before we started, for sure, 100% every time.
Awesome. So it's interesting that you just said about emotion. So I have done videos before and talked about that. I really don't sell real estate. I sell emotions. And it really is about creating that image. When someone walks into the home, we want them to immediately see themselves in the home and have that feeling that they just can't not have this home, right? That's how you get the best price for your home. So using it as a marketing tool, you just hit all of what I've been thinking and doing in my business for a long time. So when we're staging, I'm assuming that when you go into a home, it can be a little bit emotional for someone, right? Because maybe I love my bright green wall or my family photos or
Scary doll collection.
yes, scary doll collection. Yes,
That's
exactly.
actually happened. Yeah.
And so, how do you go about, because the first thing you talked about was the consultations. How do you go about your consultations and help people understand that you're not coming in and saying their style isn't good, but that you're coming in and saying, if we want to reach as many buyers as possible. So how do you handle those kind of situations?
Yeah. So I think it's important to start with what a consultation is, I guess, and different types of staging. So we do vacant staging, and that's when there's going to be nothing in the home and we bring everything in. So that's called vacant staging.
Yep.
And then there's occupied staging, and that's what you're talking about. So that's when there's still things left in the home. And so before we stage those homes, we always start with what I call a walk and talk consultation. And that's a 2-hour consultation where I come to the home and we go room by room. And what I say to them is, I'm going to tell you every single thing that I would recommend. Like if you said, Michelle, you have 2 weeks to do whatever you want with this house to make it shine for photos, then I'm going to tell them every single thing. Even though I know, like they've said ahead of time, we are not going to paint like the purple walls. We're not going to do it. And when we get to the purple walls, I'm like, you need to paint the purple walls. So I tell them everything. And we start outside because first impressions are really important. And so, yes, during this walk and talk consultation, I think why agents like it, I have a lot of agents that use it, is because they don't have to be the bad guy. I'm the bad guy. So as an agent, as a realtor, you want to have that relationship with your client. So it's difficult for you to say to them, this is not what we want to have. And it's difficult. Whereas you're bringing me or another stager into the house, and they know that we're the expert. And so what I really try to do is we go room by room. I sit down with them first, explain what we're going to do. I also spend a lot of time explaining what I'm about to talk to you about has no reflection on your personal taste. This is all about every decision I make is about how are we going to have more eyes on your house, and more eyes and which means more people are going to come and see it. And the more people that come and see it, you're going to get a higher price like that. So everything I'm talking about, no one lives in a staged home. I know you and I talked about that. I do not live in a staged home. I always say there are two ladies on my team that live in a staged home, and that's why I hired them because that's like what they love to do.
Yeah.
But 99% of people don't live in a staged home, but we don't show our homes like we live in our homes.
Well, you've covered really
Yeah.
honestly most of it, which
Oh, I'm going to
is
be the bad guy.
right. Well, when you're
Yeah.
coming in and how you have those conversations, and it
Mhm.
sounds like you do literally just say, okay, this isn't about your personal taste.
Mhm.
This is about finding the right buyer who's going to give you the best price
Yeah.
and figuring out what that looks like. And we've all looked through magazines, right? And we love the way that the magazine looks and how, right? And even if you bought all of that furniture, when you're living there, it's not really going to look like that
Right.
because you're living there, right? And
Right.
you're living. So
Right.
I'm curious what your opinion is on family photos.
Mm. Yeah, so I used to be in the mindset that no family photos at all, ever. And I'll tell you why. And
Yeah.
it's all for all personal things like diplomas, anything like political, religious, guns, like all knives, all of that has to go.
Yep.
Because you want everyone to feel welcome in your house. And they're also distracting. So what happens is, and I always tell the story when my husband and I were living in Boston and we were looking at like cute brownstones around Boston to buy. And this is like when, I'm old enough that we were looking in the paper, we were for open houses. I wasn't looking online.
Yep.
And I'd go into these houses and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, look at these pictures. I wonder if she knows, or looks like this summer in Nantucket, or I love this rug, blah blah blah." My husband would say, "None of this comes with the house." So I was so distracted by all these things that I wasn't looking at maybe the arch doorway or the really nice doors or the light coming in the windows. So those personal things, pictures or all the other things I mentioned, just really distract
Yep.
owners, and you want them looking at the home.
Gotcha.
And so yeah, I mean, I think that's so now like one or two family photos. You want to know that a family lives there, or even, or people live there. It doesn't have to be selling to a family, but like maybe one or two, but not a whole gallery wall of all your kids for the last 15 years because it's just distracting.
Sure. It makes sense. And we want them to see their family there.
Mhm.
So I see
That's
what
a
you're
good
saying.
point. That's another point I make to every single person that we work with is we don't want people to walk into your home and to be able to envision who currently lives there. We want them to envision themselves living there, and they only have a couple seconds to make that. So we just want it to be a neutral palette to see the house. We don't want them. We are we love to do beautiful staging and we pride ourselves in that, and that's something I think we're known for, but we really don't want them noticing the furniture. We want them noticing the home and how the whole thing makes them feel.
Right.
Because if you can emotionally connect with the home, there's a better chance you're going to want to buy it versus walking into a home that's vacant. It's really difficult to connect with a vacant home.
Right. And it sounds like you do a great job of partnering with both sellers and realtors as far as these are if you want to do everything.
Right.
So you're including painting, you're including all different kinds of aspects. And it sounds also like there can be choices. So some of it could be do it yourself, some of it could be bring you in. It sounds also like there are situations where you would do it all for them, the painting and everything else, and handle all that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah. So during the consultation, the 2-hour walk and talk consultation, again, this is just for occupied homes, obviously, but just want to point that out. But so what I give them their full list. I have a little staging report. They have a clipboard. They're taking notes. I find it's easier if they take notes because they're more meaningful to them than my notes. And then I will give them everything. I always, for every house, I recommend two things. Before I even walk in, I recommend that every house should be deep cleaned by like sparkling clean. Like if you have a cleaner that comes every other week, this is the next level from that. So once everything's out and it's ready to be staged, if we're coming in, then you have a cleaner come in
Yep.
and just do it's really important. So yeah, the other thing we always recommend is window washing. It's so important for that natural light to come in, that washing your windows, having sparkling clean so you can see the outside. People crave light. And so the more light you can have in a space, the better. And we always, if you can take the screens off, we always recommend taking the screens off. So if you have a window washer come or you do it yourself and it's the time of year where you can take off the screens, or even in the middle of the summer, people don't typically leave every single window open. So if there are a couple windows in your kitchen or your bedroom that you always keep open, you can keep those screens on, but it's really nice to have them off for photos. It
Interesting.
really is helpful for the photos.
So it blocks some of the light is
No, it lets the light in.
meaning yes, we're saying the same thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
It having them in is blocking
Yes,
some of that light. I
exactly.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Perfect.
exactly.
I
Yeah.
would never have thought of that.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
is funny how much we don't realize that there's a nose print or a fingerprint on the window
Yeah.
or whatever.
They're often very dirty. Like
Yeah.
people go years
Yeah.
without washing their windows. So I always, start with that. And you said other things that
So if you're recommending paint, if you're recommending
if they do it themselves. Yeah.
furniture, what have you. So we also have talked about this sounds like you're going through the whole house.
Mhm.
And I think for some of the listeners it may feel a little bit daunting. So you're going through the whole house, but they don't have to do all of it.
Exactly.
If they want to obviously get the maximum dollar, the most things they can do, the better. But how do you go about helping them determine what are the most important things to do?
So I will say that, 2 hours of me making suggestions about what to do in your house, it's overwhelming. Even if your house is neat and tidy, there's always stuff that we can do. And I tell them that in the beginning. I'm like, in real life, I don't think I'm overwhelming, but this might be a little overwhelming for you.
Yeah.
So at the end of the consultation, I really help people decide the most important things.
Okay.
And so, start here, don't bother. I know you thought you really had to spend a lot of time in the basement. Definitely don't do that. Spend your time upstairs. If you're only going to paint one space, it should be this space. And so I really help them do that so they don't feel overwhelmed. And a lot of times people will just think about it. I say, take a couple days, think about it, let it digest. And then they're like, okay, this is doable. Even if I just do half of what or a quarter of what, we're gonna be in better shape than when we started.
Understood.
And so that's a thing. So I did notice that a lot of people were overwhelmed with the amount of not every house, but some people, I'm saying get window washers, get a cleaner. You could use a landscaper, just to do a fall or spring cleanup. These rooms, you have 15 colors in your house. It's really better if it's neutral. It's going to be, really not calming for the buyer. And so I also offer a project management service.
Wonderful.
Where people can just hire me to I sort of think of myself as the boots on the ground. So maybe they're living out of state, or maybe they're just really busy and they don't want to deal with it, or maybe they just it's just not their thing. They don't want to spend their time doing it. So I've hired, 13 contractors for a house, and I was
Wow.
completely in charge of it. Or one woman said, if you can just help me with the paint, I can take care of everything else.
Perfect.
So that's something that I try to take off their plate if they don't want to do that.
That's awesome. So Michelle, one of the things I love that I keep hearing is that there is a whole menu of options, and that initial staging consult, the walk and talk that you talked about, and I love the name of it, by the way, because it makes it less daunting, right? It
Right.
makes it less overwhelming. It's just a walk and talk, right? We're giving information here. You could leave a consultation and have the seller do nothing if that's what they
And that's
choose.
what I say. I always say, these are my recommendations.
Yeah.
I know by doing these, your pictures will be better.
Right.
Therefore, and you always should have a professional photographer.
Of course.
Always a professional photographer.
Yep.
Big mistake if not. But I always say, if you don't, it's up to you in the end what you decide to do.
Right.
These are just my suggestions, and this is what I have found over the years really make a difference. But let's prioritize them, and if they choose to do nothing, then that's fine too. So sometimes I never hear back from people because they're doing it all themselves,
Understood.
and that's great. Some people want to do it themselves; they're capable of doing themselves, and sometimes I can help them with a little or a lot.
I happen to have a red couch. Red couches aren't for everybody. So let's say as an example that you're suggesting that you neutralize my couch. If I need to take that couch out, I'm assuming you have furniture that you can do that. How does that work? How long does the furniture stay? How does it get priced? Can you give me any information you can about if you're bringing furniture or objects into my house?
Yeah. So it goes back to remembering that there are two different types of staging. So there's occupied staging and vacant staging. So for occupied staging, we're doing one on Monday. Then she has things in her house. We've done a walk and talk. I've made my suggestions, and for the last couple of weeks, she mostly, uh, vast majority of what you learn in the walk and talk is editing. So taking things out. We want every space to feel light and bright and to feel as big as possible. People are paying per square foot.
Yep.
So we want them to walk in and feel like there's plenty of space and there's plenty of storage and the closets aren't cramped and just feel like it's very easy to walk into that space. So she's spent the last couple weeks taking things out. She did hire painters, which were really important at her house. And then I can decide what we always try to use the homeowners things first, I should say. So our goal is not to bring in as much as we can to the house. But then I just go through and decide, what could she use there? So in your case, like we could replace your red couch with a neutral couch. But they might need artwork a lot of times. If they're not going to be living there, like maybe they're moving to their camp for, while it's on the market, or they're vacationing, or they booked themselves into a hotel for a week. Then I can bring in soft goods. So soft goods are what are considered like pillows, bedding, rugs, those type of things I can't bring in when people are living there because it's just for sanitary reasons. I
Sure.
let them bring it to the next house, and I don't want people using the bedding and then
course.
bring it to someone else's house.
Yep.
But if they're not living there, I can bring those things in. And with a vacant house, we're just bringing everything in. So, it's two very different stages, but for each, it's priced the same. So, I break down my proposal. I like to, instead of just providing one big number, I'm from Maine. I know Mainers like to know where their money is going.
Yeah.
And so the first part of my proposal is how much will cost each month to rent any of the items we bring into the house. And the second line is the time that my team and I have an amazing team. I don't know when I should shout that out, but I have the best team ever.
Awesome.
And they make everything possible, and I'm very lucky. And so it's our time. So our time to be at the warehouse packing things, and then getting to the stage. We spend all day at the stages, making everything perfect. And then on the flip side, once the house sells, we have to come back, pack everything up. The movers come, we bring it back. So that's our time.
Yep.
And the third part is we have a professional moving company that we work with, and it's just their fee to move the furniture there and then back.
Excellent. Do you have, I heard you touch on that this homeowner you were talking about was moving stuff out. Do you have any tips and tricks for people who are looking or thinking about selling for decluttering? We hear a lot about decluttering. What does it mean? How do you best do it?
Yeah. So less is more. So I always, during these walk and talk consultations, this is where we talk about it most. And there's never been a house that I haven't said this should be removed. So you just want the space to feel big, and you just don't want a lot of knickknacks. So any like little knickknacks, any little collections, anything like that needs to go. Extra furniture, because that really makes the house feel small. Another thing I notice in almost every single house is the scale of the furniture is not right. So you might have a tiny room or a smaller room, and you have this huge sectional, and that just makes it look small. It's funny though, because houses that have furniture in them look bigger than the houses that don't have furniture. So vacant houses look smaller, and then when you put furniture in, it looks bigger. However, if a homeowner has furniture that's not the right scale, that really isn't helpful. So really just packing away all the, on bookshelves, like packing away, we say, keep hardcovers up there. And if we're coming in to help, then we can do all the bookshelves. We do all the bookshelves. And I tell them exactly what to keep, what we can work with, and everything else gets packed away. Anything that's small kind of gets packed away. So for example, if you walk into the front door and you're in an entry and there's a console, someone might have a lamp and a plant and like 3 pictures of their kids, and then some little, I don't know, little something. And all that really needs to be on that entry, again, first impression, is maybe a lamp and something green, a plant. We use pops of green in every single one of our rooms, this color green actually, because it brings life to pictures. So every single room we do a pop of green. So if you look at a picture and you are go to our Instagram page and pick any shot, And if you put your finger over the plant or the green, the photograph sort of falls flat. So we do try to, feel like the house has life by putting green, fake greens. We have lots of fake screens. Yeah.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
had never thought of that.
Yeah.
I know when we've talked in the past, you also talked about closets, right? If you've got too many clothes in your
Yeah.
closet, it can be hard. Also, if you have multicolored hangers,
Yep.
and if you have, like I do, my clothes are in there sort of by type of item, not by color.
Yeah.
And it's just distracting, right? Because
Yep.
your eye's going all over the place. So
Yeah.
very interesting.
There is a rule of thumb with closets that
Yeah.
might be helpful for people. So the maximum closet should be full is 70%. And so in the best case scenario, they're empty. So people can just see a nice closet. But if someone's living there, when they open the closet door, which they will, typically like in the entry or in the primary bedroom, they'll look at the closets or the pantry. And if it's overstuffed and just, they can just tell it's jam full, then they're going to automatically think there's not enough storage in this house. So I call that like a red flag. So at the walk and talk, we talk about red flags. And so that's when back to your question about what you should pack, go through all of those things, decide, it's the middle of the summer, I'm not going to be wearing my winter coats until after we move. So it's pre-packing. So you're going to pack anyway. So I always say we're packing before. It's going to be more work up front, but you're going to make more money by doing it. And then it's less work on the back end.
Right.
And so just getting rid of those things in your closet. And then for people that are able to go the extra mile, the same hangers are great, color coding, because it just makes people just feel just like in the primary bedroom is a really important space, which we might talk about later. But you want that primary bedroom to be like a sanctuary and just to walk in and close the door and like whatever you have going on, you have kids, you have your job, whatever you have going on, that this is just, you want to think about like the most expensive hotel that you've ever been to or seen and how that made you feel. And we want to replicate that. So that comes down to their closet as well.
Interesting. Very interesting. So I know why I would pick you to stage, basically because of all the things that you've just said. But if I'm looking for a stager, what should I look for in their qualifications or in the way that they're coming about talking to me? What should I expect and look for?
I think it's important to look for, right off the bat, if they have been certified as a stager, taking a staging certification course. It's not a regulated industry, so you don't have to do it. But I certainly did right from the beginning and got certified. And the amount of information that you learn with staging, we want to have a certain level of staging, and we always want to be raising the industry and making people feel better about staging and have good experiences with staging. So taking those classes and learning all those basics, so then you're always doing the best job, and meeting industry standards is really important. So I took one in the beginning, and then since then, I feel like I'm one of those lifelong learners. I don't have to talk about me, but I think doing that, and then I had a second certification. So always find a stager that's always learning new things. I also have been in a mastermind group for the last 3 years. I also joined something called the Staging Collective, and it's something you apply for, and it's a group of 50 staging companies from across the country. And we meet every Wednesday via Zoom and then every Friday and talk about different topics. And every week is a different topic that we learn about. And then I just got back from a conference. And so there's an annual conference. So I think finding someone sort of asking, what do you do? How do you keep on top? Of trends? How do you, keep on top of your look, your design, how you're treating customers? That's really important. I would look at their social media pages, their websites. And I'd also talk to other agents because realtors talk, right? And I'd also, I'd get recommendations from them. I'd also compare different stagers. Everyone has a different aesthetic. So I think that my aesthetic is very different from, other aesthetics like locally. So you want to really go with aesthetic that makes sense for your property.
Fair enough. That's great. And so speaking of aesthetics, I'm getting back to the feeling from a seller's perspective of it being a little bit daunting. Are there specific rooms that should be focused on, or should you really do the whole house, or what's the rule of thumb?
Yeah. So the most important spaces that you get the highest return on investment are the kitchen, the primary bedroom and primary bathroom, And then also the living room. If there are two living rooms, if there's a den and then like a more formal living space, and it's very clear that the homeowner spends all the time in the den, then it's that space.
Okay.
So at a minimum, those are the ones that buyers are looking at most closely and how they feel and how they connect with those spaces. However, in most houses, we end up doing, I'd say, the first floor in a normal sized house, like in an
Mhm.
average sized house. Because you don't want to, if there's a dining room, you don't want it to be empty. It doesn't make people feel good to look or walk into an empty space.
Yep.
However, on the second floor, or, depending where your bedrooms are, let's say a house has 3 or 4 bedrooms. I always say the primary bedroom is imperative. The other bedrooms, the only time, my goal isn't to have them spend as much money as possible. So I never say you need to stage all these bedrooms. I just say the primary is important. If there's another bedroom that has like a quirky layout, or someone might walk in and be like, is that really a bedroom? Or can I fit my queen bed and 2 nightstands? Then you want to stage. Like if I'm sitting there, as a stager with buyer's eyes, wondering, is this really a bedroom? Is it only a
Mhm.
twin bed? Then you want to make it easy for the buyer to envision that.
Yeah.
But if not, we typically leave those empty. And then sometimes with a smaller bedroom, we'll pop in an office just because so many people are working from home, and it just plants a seed like, oh, right, this could be my office.
Got it.
So, yeah. So, sort of the heart of the home is how I like to think of it.
Sure. And I always talk to my sellers about eliminating objections ahead of time. We
Mhm.
want to eliminating as many objections as possible. You
Mhm.
refer to them as red flags.
Flags,
So
yeah.
when you're entering the home, like you said before, in that first 3 seconds, 10
Mhm.
seconds, you want them to emotionally connect with the space.
Mhm.
So, right, if you have a mudroom or if you, whatever entry that you talked about with a little bit of green and
Mhm.
whatnot, it's all about getting them to want to come in more and want them to want to stay,
Mhm.
right? That's sort of the whole purpose. So,
And
excellent.
I have one to add on. It really
Yeah,
starts outside.
fair enough.
So, first impressions are made right away.
Mhm.
So, during the consultation, we always start outside, and people think it's just going to be the quickest part. We end up spending a lot of time there.
Mhm.
So, I'm happy to share any of the tips. I tend to get every single person. I
Please
don't know if
do.
you want that
Yes,
now
yes,
or
please.
yeah. So outside, you should start right. When you're pulling up, because that's what buyers are going to do. And most often it needs a fall or spring cleanup.
Mhm.
So the whole house, needs to be raked, and then if you can freshly mulch right before pictures, if it's the correct season,
Mhm.
that is just fresh, and the dark mulch, like not the
Mhm.
red mulch, like the
Yep.
dark, like rich color looking.
Yep. Looks like earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
I have often recommend I have a landscaper that I work with that he'll just come in and, do some pruning. We don't want big trees like blocking the windows because
Yep.
that's blocking light. And just making sure that that your front porch, your front entry, that the front door is painted and fresh. All the windows are clean. All the cobwebs are like up above are taken care of. The lights outside to actually take those off, probably the first time ever, and cleaning those.
Yes.
I always recommend a new welcome mat
Mhm.
at all the doors. And depending on the season, something greeneries, ferns, or, something
Mhm.
green. And power washing. So for every house, almost, I have to recommend those things
Okay.
because you just want them to walk in and already feel, because people think about red flag. If something's not taken care of on the outside, what's not taken care of on the inside?
Yep.
So we don't want that before they walk in the door.
Right. It's all about that perception. And I do encourage when I'm working with buyers for them to do a drive-by.
Yep.
And so that drive-by is exactly what you're talking about, where they're literally just driving by the home and what is the impression they get from that quick second they
Yep.
have to look at it.
Yep.
And all of those things are so important. If they're coming by at night, if you've just cleaned your lights, it's going to be a lot brighter
Mhm.
and a lot more inviting, right? And if you've got those trees pruned or grass mowed or leaves picked up or what have you, although this time of year, we're in fall right now, this time
Mhm.
of year can make that a little daunting. But no, that makes total sense. And I love that that's the initial focus.
Mhm.
What about trends? So obviously you must have a warehouse of furniture, but trends change. We've had barn doors come in and now they're
Mhm.
not as in. And
Mhm.
what do you tell me about that? How do you keep up with that?
Yeah, I keep up with that. I look at that very closely. So every single day, I spend a lot of time looking at other stagers, my staging friends from across the country, to see what they're doing. Often, the stagers on the West Coast, you see the trends actually. So I'll see something on the West Coast, like in California, and like 2 years later, it's in Maine. so,
Okay,
so,
gotcha. That
so
makes
I
sense.
always, I
Yeah.
always try to sort of see what they're doing,
Uh-huh.
honestly. So I spent a lot of time looking. The people in the staging collective that I'm with we just have these really high standards in terms of how we want to, raise the industry.
Mhm.
And part of that is keeping on trend. And so because buyers are looking for that. They're not looking for like aged furniture.
Mhm.
So I do a lot of research on that. And my team and I are always trying to like switch up how we might, do something in the kitchen or do something in the living room. But we really just wanted everything to look just for us. Our aesthetic is just really neutral with sometimes pops of color. So it's just easy on the eye. And, I pay attention to little things like arm rolls. So when if like when I'm going to buy a couch, I know, like, I'm just thinking it because it's here, like what kind of couch and what it should look like
Mhm.
versus something that looks older. And
Yep.
then we have a warehouse sale and we get rid of all the stuff we're not using. And so that's really helpful to clean out. We have a over 1,500 square foot warehouse. And so, but it gets really packed. And so once a year we have a warehouse sale and get rid of all the things that we consider that are dated or we no longer can use.
So we're talking about sellers spending some money here up front. What would your average cost be for a seller to do some type of staging? And then let's lead that into the success stories and what that could mean for them for price.
That's a really tough question. And I was thinking about that because there's so many factors that go into that. So, houses, in California are going to be more expensive than, though Maine, we're not inexpensive here. So,
Sure.
different parts of the country. And also, it always depends on the size of the house.
Mhm.
It depends if it's an occupied house where we're just bringing in some stuff versus a vacant house where
Yep.
we're bringing in everything.
Yeah.
And also there's some houses that are quote unquote luxury houses,
Mm.
and those are going to be different than a house that's not a luxury.
Mhm.
I think a rule of thumb, I sort of researched this and what I've always said, but again, it really depends. But sort of the industry rule of thumb is that staging could cost anywhere from 0.5% to 1% of your asking price of your, yeah. So that's like a
Interesting.
general rule,
Yeah.
but it doesn't always apply.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. And it also depends, like different stagers have different price points because they have different types of staging.
Mhm.
Not every stager has, it's not important for every stager to have certain trends or that everyone has their own style. They all have their different price points.
Yeah.
Every business owner has their own expenses, so they know how they can make a profit. And, so it's really goes case by case.
Got it. Makes sense. So tell me a little bit about a success story you can think about, somebody that you staged for and how that worked.
Okay. So I thought about this because, so this summer I got a call from a woman and she lives in the Portland area. But her father had passed away and he had a house on the ocean in Booth Bay.
Okay.
And it was her job to get the house ready to sell. And he had a lot of things in there. He was a lot older. So that happens a lot. So you don't want to walk into a house where you can tell like, oh, it's a young family that lives here or an older family that lives
Mhm.
here, because that might not resonate with you.
Mhm.
So, so she knew right away. She's a really talented woman. She's a very good eye. And she knew right away they had to get everything out.
Okay.
And then she asked us for a very quick turnaround. And we went, staged the house, and I wrote down the numbers, which have fallen. Okay. So the house sold very quickly. It sold in less than a week. So it went on the market for 2.4, which I know is an expensive house, but this
Mhm.
is the first example I thought of. Once the broker saw the staging, he increased before they went on market. So it didn't go on the market. They were going to put it on the market for
Yeah.
2.4.
Okay.
They saw the staging. They increased it $100,000. So put it on the market for 2.5.
Wow.
In less than a week, it sold for 2.75.
Amazing.
So so my client and her brothers or sister, I forget, made an extra $350,000.
Amazing.
So that she was thrilled.
Yeah.
Clearly, we worked our tails off.
Sure.
With every stage, we work our tails off. I think that's a really good example of,
Yeah.
and that does happen. That they, I always ask agents, what are you going to put this on for? And they'll give me a number. And then after they see the staging and how it looks, they up that before it even goes on the market. Cause they're like, wow, now someone can see the space, feel the space.
Yeah, it is true that what you're looking at when you come in, and also how much work you think you're going to have to do. So we talked about those multiple colors.
Yep.
And not everybody wants to live in a neutral palette, but if you come into a neutral palette, you don't feel like you have to change it immediately.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So I always say during my walk and talk consultations that you want to picture that someone's coming from out of state. They're, coming here from the West Coast or for New York, and they could only be in Maine in this area for, let's say the weekend. And so they can only see so many houses.
Mm-hmm.
So you want them to be looking through MLS and Redfin, whoever you're using, and looking through, because 99% of people, that's how they find their houses.
Mm-hmm.
And your house has to be on the very top of that must-see list. And so that's what's so important. So you want to, and part of that is making it easy for the homeowner. If they're looking at it, for example, with the paint question,
Mm-hmm.
they have, 3 kids, they have a full-time job, they don't know any painters in Maine, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'd have to paint every room in that house next, because it just looks like too much work for them.
Sure.
So we want to make it easy for them to walk into.
I also talk about that with my sellers, that it's not only as an objection, but when you're asking them to do something, for example, if you say you have a failed septic, but you don't want to fix it, they're going to get an estimate in their head, or an actual estimate of what the cost is, but then they're going to add on the pain and suffering cost of having to do that work.
Yep.
So
It's
having
always
this
higher.
done up front, exactly, can
Yep.
gain you a lot more money.
Yep.
Well, this has been spectacular, Michelle.
Oh,
I
it's so
really
much
appreciate
fun.
your time.
Thanks
Yes.
for asking me.
And for more questions that you have about staging, please make some comments. We'd be happy to come back and give more information.